All right, so the big news of the day is that Russia, led by Vladimir Putin, has invaded Ukraine. Figured I'd talk about that. I like talking about other things than crime. Now, how are Ukraine and Russia linked, and why does Russia think they should be invading Ukraine? Well, let's go back to 2014. You may remember there was something went on with Russia. Well, the southern part of the Ukraine is called the Crimea. Crimea is a very important place strategically because it sits on the Black Sea, which has an outlet to the Mediterranean, and it provides a warm water port. Because remember, almost all of Russia's ports are in Arctic areas in the north, where there's parts of the year it's frozen into ice. So there was a war between the Russian Empire and the British Empire in the 1800s over the Crimean Peninsula. It's very important strategically. And in 2014, Russia was able to successfully pry control of the Crimea away from Ukraine. So now there's this little piece of what was the Ukraine sitting in the south that's actually part of the political entity of Russia. It has no land bridge connecting it. Now, perhaps that's Putin's goal in this invasion. Certainly he does not and is not capable of like overrunning the entire country of the Ukraine and occupying it. There's really not much reason in a modern world with the way all of these economies are intertwined to fully capture someone else's whole country and try to control it. Require tremendous expenditure of resources. Already the Russian people are in the street protesting Russia's invasion, their own country's invasion of another sovereign state, much like people in the United States protested against the war in Iraq, Vietnam, etc. Of course, the people in Russia are going to suffer repercussions. Putin puts people in jail and kills journalists, but that's an aside. So perhaps Putin's goal here is to take control of the sliver of land that will connect Russia to the Crimea, so they can have this warm water port, huge boats, gas, etc., can, help with their economy. Probably the number one reason is NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which was formed in the wake of World War II, England, France, United States, other countries, which created a strategic alliance in Western Europe initially and against potential Soviet aggression. As the years have gone on, it's crept eastward. More countries have been added. And in the early 1990s, as the Soviet Union dissolved and NATO's supposed raison d'etre, its reason of being, defense against the Soviet Union, ceased to exist because there was no Soviet Union, NATO didn't go away. But the new sovereign state of Russia was promised that NATO would not bring in member countries that bordered Russia. So these would have been the former Soviet socialist republics, places like Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Ukraine. Now, some of those countries have been brought in. So now there's NATO countries that have small borders with Russia, which is a strategic risk for Russia. Ukraine has a much longer border. So there's legitimate reasons why, the United States doesn't for example, we attempted to invade Cuba, we backed the Bay of Pigs invasion in Cuba, until JFK pulled the air cover, leading to a debacle. And then over the years, we funded assassination attempts against Fidel Castro because we didn't even want that little country that was that close to us to potentially be a staging area for a Soviet attack. So why would Russia want a strategic alliance, NATO, bringing in a country that's right on its border like Ukraine? So that's, it's legitimate from a geopolitical, or it's plausibly legitimate. I'm not saying it's necessarily the right thing to do strategically. So, and then also, Ukraine and Russia have a common culture. In fact, of course, the word Russian comes from a group of people, the Rus, that first appear. They probably were actually basically Vikings that came into that area in about 900 AD, and they first, their culture first, the Rus culture first, really formed and blossomed in Kiev, which is the capital of Ukraine, and then moved eastward into what's now called Russia. So Ukrainian culture is Russian culture. I mean, this is very similar cultures, but laid on top of that, because Russia became an empire and the Ukraine was forcibly sucked into the Russian Empire. Of course, in Russian empires have been some of the most murderous and bloody and oppressive empires over the centuries anywhere on planet Earth. And the Ukrainian people had developed such a hatred, some of them, for Russians, that when the Nazis rolled into the Ukraine, which was part of Russia at that point, when they rolled into the province of Ukraine, the Ukrainian people greeted the Nazis as liberators, not conquerors. And one of the considered Hitler's strategic blunders was, if he had not had the Nazis, well, to Nazis, you can't separate the desire for Holocaust of Jews and, to a lesser extent, Slavic peoples from the Nazi movement. So there really was no way Hitler could not have oppressed and murdered the Ukrainian people, because that was kind of one of the points of the Nazis' quest for conquest. But if he had treated the Ukrainian people differently, they in fact could have been very quickly amalgamated into the Nazi war effort, and they could have went and fought the Russians. And of course, the war in the East that went on between the Nazis and the Russians was a horrible war of attrition, with shocking numbers of human beings killing each other in the worst conditions, and of course, having a few million Ukrainian troops to drop like cannon fodder would have saved the German army and would have been a good move for Hitler. Strategically, obviously, it's good that he didn't do that, because we're glad the Nazis didn't win World War II. But so Russia and Ukraine have a common culture. Putin has written and talked extensively in recent years about the need for them to be realigned. And I mean, think about if, say, like in the United States, Texas is a state that has a unique culture, and people, are kind of joking Texas is going to secede, and to some people it's not a joke. But what if a state, really seceded? I mean, you think the U.S. government would let Texas secede, or should? You don't think? I mean, I don't think this is going to happen, but like, imagining that would happen, what, the tank's not going to roll in there? The U.S. military's not going to kill whatever people in Texas who really are going to come outside with their guns, or the National Guard, or whoever wants to play war down there? Of course we're not going to let Texas secede. Why should we? And just like China with Taiwan, elements of Russia feel that way about Ukraine, but of course, Ukraine was, as part of the deal of the Soviet Union's breakup, Ukraine was granted its own hegemony, its own control over itself, and regardless of what someone may think culturally they should be together, the Ukrainian people have not evinced interest in being part of Russia. So it's definitely an aggressive move on Putin's part. It's not irrational or crazy. He's not doing it for no reason. Putin is one of the most calculated, ruthless, and efficient political operators we've seen in a long time. Globally, in fact, Oliver Stone did a series of interviews with him. Oliver Stone does a lot of weird stuff. And Oliver Stone, he did another documentary called South of the Border, where he interviewed every political leader. Did he get the Mexican president? I think he did. From, Mexico on down through Central and South America, which you don't get to see long sort of intellectual interviews with people like that in the mainstream American media. Oliver Stone isn't the greatest, say, journalist, but at least he's going and talking to these people. I mean, Putin kind of controlled Oliver Stone in the conversation more than Oliver Stone controlling him, but Putin's a very impressive person. So just like, if you see whether you liked Barack Obama or not, for example, you couldn't listen to him talk for a long time and not feel, oh, here's a extremely intelligent, controlled, person who you maybe don't agree with everything he's doing, but you're not disturbed by him having the levers of power. Trump, obviously, it's a different story, and maybe Biden is turning out to be more like Trump than Obama in that sense. But Putin, a brilliant political operative, he was a KGB agent. As Soviet Union unraveled, I know you guys have heard this term, the oligarchs, and when they talk about Russia a lot, and you might vaguely know what that means. That's very, very interesting, and it's tied in with why they call Russia and Bulgaria and some of the other Soviet republics gangster states. So the way that the Soviet Union dissolved, there was no war. It just sort of, you wake up one day, you're say you're managing some massive factory on the outskirts of Moscow, right? That processes, I don't know, I'm just going to say it's a steel factory. And you're part of the Soviet system. The government gives you the money to pay payroll every week, and etc. One day you get up and there really is no Soviet Union, right? No one comes with the payroll. But yet, I mean, the economy's still functioning to some degree. The workers are coming to work. I mean, you're trying to figure out something. You have a sense of responsibility. And smart Communist Party officials, KGB agents like Vladimir Putin, most of all, went in, and basically what went on, the people that had been running the timber, the steel, the coal, the copper, the gas, making electronics, making cars, anything there was in Russia, those factory managers, in concert often with either Russian military, Communist Party officials, or KGB, and people from the thieves in the law, the Russian criminal official underworld, basically took over because the government just went away. These factories are owned by the government. Suddenly there is no government. They're owned by nobody. So the guys running them keep running them, but now the money coming in and the money going out is involved with the gangsters and former KGB, depending on each industry. So that's how you had all these billionaires rise up. And those are the oligarchs. Russia has many billionaires. They're mostly people that have what would probably be considered monopolistic control over portions of natural resources or whole sectors of the Russian economy. Many of them were like gangsters in another life. Some were just guys who made deals with gangsters, and some were political people. Back in the Sochi Olympics, the Winter Olympics that was held in Russia some years ago, Putin famously he spent a tremendous amount of the government's money, and a lot of it was spent with oligarchs that had been his allies all along, friends with him. Like there were two brothers who have been his daily judo sparring partners for many years, who are his good friends. They alone, I think they got $5 billion to build a stadium that was going to be used one time or something, And so Russia is a country run by the rich, for the rich. Vladimir Putin is a classic strongman, but he's a brilliant one. Russia's never had a properly functioning democracy. Many countries have not. So Putin, shrewd operator, he has the military capacity to have knocked out the Ukrainian air defense, and he's doing what he wants to do with them, but that's a different story than having enough troops to go and kill enough people to occupy the whole country, which, again, I can't see a reason, the way the modern world economy is integrated, that any country would want to do that to another. But certainly there's a good reason for him to want to have a land bridge, so he may push into the country, seize things, and then, like he did with Crimea, say, okay, let's make a truce, but we're going to keep this sliver of land, which will give him a land bridge to Crimea, and probably more importantly, a buffer between a potential another NATO country and his own border, and why should he want a border with a NATO country? NATO's reason to exist was to protect against the Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union ended, it did not cease to exist. So who is its enemy now? It's still a buffer against potential Russian power and etc. Russia's economy is, in one hand, very important to the world, and on the other hand, it could disappear and no one would notice. It's a very important provider of oil and, to a lesser extent, wheat, but to Europe and the Middle East, not obviously the United States. Other than that, its economy's not that. I mean, you don't go to stores and see things made in Russia very often, now do you? Russia has $630 billion in foreign currency reserves it's built up. Not much. The West's economic sanctions. So Biden has been threatening Russia will be punished. That does not mean anything militarily. It means economic sanctions. But you can only sanction oil so much because the global economy needs oil. Russia has $630 billion on hand as the world economy heats back up post-COVID. Oil is now back up at $100 a barrel. Russia has low extraction costs, so they're very profitable. I think they make a nice profit per barrel. So Russia's in a good place strategically. I would predict they'll probably get a similar result to the 2014 situation where they pried Crimea away, where they will hit them hard, put Ukraine on their heels, get the world in an uproar, and then make a deal. Leave us with this little strip of land. They flexed their might, expanded their borders a little, maybe giving themselves a little more room for diversifying their economy with now a better land bridge to their big warm water port that they now have in Crimea. So history of Russia is one of the bloodiest. Russian people probably suffered. I mean, and this is saying a lot in a world where, you had the transatlantic slave trade and Africans in the New World. I mean, if any group of people suffered more murder and brutalization from their own government and wars and etc. than sub-Saharan Africans in recent times, it'd be the Russians. Huge amounts of death in World War I. Stalin starved 10 million kulaks to death in between the two wars. Kulaks were just basically successful farmers who represented the bourgeoisie class, which, of course, Marxism felt the bourgeoisie's existence had kind of run its course. And the whole history of the ideas behind Marxism, Leninism, communism, very, very interesting, whether you believe in that stuff or not. Studying it, you will get a big understanding of a wide swath of European history. And you can't understand American history without understanding the history of the culture we were spawned off from, Europe, and even those of my many viewers who rightfully blame many things on the evil white man. Well, you better learn more about European civilization, and then you'll understand just how violent it is, and that it's based on, kind of a combination of Germanic and Roman cultures, culture of war for war's sake, Germanic, Scandinavian. You die in battle, you go to heaven. That's how you go to heaven in some Germanic religion. You die fighting and killing other people. That's how you go to heaven. That's obviously very different from Christianity or Islam or Buddhism or anything like that. You gain paradise by killing. Think about that. You gain paradise by killing. And of course, Rome was all about subjugating, conquering, and commanding other people. They conquered and commanded the Germanics until the Germanics overran them. And so that's what's going on in Russia and Ukraine. Obviously, there's a lot more to it. If you're interested in this, use YouTube to watch 10 or 12 different things and, start to get your own set of opinions and data, because there's a lot to know. But I gave you a lot of good points that are all salient and factional. Al Prophet.